Say hi to the people, Tayo. He's nibbling on some cat grass right now, as you can see. Munch, munch. Oh, you're really getting in there, huh? I printed a little cage. Oh, see, you smell it, huh? Oh, there's some dirt in there, but it's caged. Locked away from your cat grass munching self, huh? Isn't that right? Yeah, he's a dangerous cat. These are the original ones I started growing that he's nibbling on, and this is the second one, or second batch I started, these two smaller guys here. But just for fun, I 3D printed out this little small one. I forgot to film this, but I did already pre-soak the wheatgrass seeds, and so they're just covered in a very thin layer of soil. But I started to realize a problem I was having with these ones when they first started growing. Now it's not so much of an issue. You could actually, I can just show you, pick up this whole planter and no problem, right? You're not going to pull out any of the seeds. But originally, and this won't quite fit on here now, I printed these little covers, and the idea being that, you know, the cat grass could still get light, the grass could kind of even poke out of these, but obviously it's a bit too tall for that now, and they're plenty sturdy as is. But I thought, oh gosh, I should do something similar here. And you might think, oh, well, you have a 3D pot. I mean, you've made this file. Surely it would be simple enough to design a lid for this. But that's not what the title of the video was it? No, for some reason, I really got stuck on the idea of some sort of enclosure to protect this whole thing and to keep my cat far away from my precious little wheatgrass. And I got stuck on the idea of sort of a cage. I don't know why I was so fixated on this concept, but I was. And, you know, as you can see, I've printed something that does work. It doesn't look amazing, and maybe the holes are not frequent enough. And as you can see from some of the later layer lines, it didn't really print well towards the end. Not to mention, this just took a really long time to print. This was about 1 hour and 10 minutes on the printer because there were so many Z layers the printer had to go through. Well, one of the easiest solutions to print something faster is to print it flat. And that's initially what I was trying to do. Now, my first thought was taking off the top and bottom walls of the print itself and then leaving little inserts around the perimeter. Again, top and bottom layers removed, so it lets plenty of light through. It is fairly flexible. I don't think this is terrible. I just think that the holes here need to be bigger. It's hard to tell by looking at it, but they're just not quite right. So the good news is it definitely fit. I shrank it by about another 1/5 of a millimeter. So in total, I had to give it about 0.4 millimeters, nearly 1/2 millimeter of clearance. The bad news is I'm clearly going senile because I have no idea why I printed a top and bottom. Again, this is just supposed to be like a little cover. It's not meant to be an actual cage for the plant. It's not a convict, it's a plant. It doesn't have legs, so I don't think it's gonna get out. I think I did this last night. I made a version without the, or excuse me, oh no, I'm stupid. Right, I do it in the slicer. I just totally forgot to change the slicer settings. That's why this printed with shells. I thought, oh, maybe I remade these. That way, oh, if it had the top and bottom shell, maybe it would dimension. No, I just forgot to change the slicer settings back to how I had them. Computer shut off last night. When I turned it back on, slicer settings were back to default. So, whoops. I'm gonna print another 11 of the new ones with the smaller dimension, and then I'll assemble this probably without the top and bottom. But yeah, that's where we're at. So hopefully these do fit now. Let's see. Yeah, it's still a bit of a weird fit. I'm not sure. Stop timer. I think there's a little bit too much of a give to it. It's really too flimsy. I really did print this all quite thin. Obviously, without the top and bottom layers, they don't have a lot of rigidity to them. Even with, this is the same thing, just with top and bottom layers, and it's still pretty flexible. This is kind of a bust. I mean, at this point, the original cage is better than that. The printing time is just egregious, so Yeah, I mean, this didn't work out quite like how I wanted it to. I think I'm going to take it back to the drawing board, which is a bit of a bummer, but that's part of 3D printing, right? You prototype, you try out different ideas. I do like this. I like the concept of not using the top and bottom layers to make something see-through. I mean, that's practically, see-through. It's mesh, right? And this is something that would be very hard to model in most CAD software. It would really bog down your software to do this, not to mention the amount of time it would take to actually model this part. After, so many iterations of that, I realized what I was doing really wasn't working. And I took a break. I watched some YouTube, I had some dinner, and I really thought about this in the background. Sometimes stepping away from an idea can give you the perspective you need to come up with a good solution. But that solution happened to be one that I already came up with a long time ago. That's right, I made a lid. It works great. I mean, it does exactly what I want it to. It keeps my cat away from the cat grass when it's too young, so he doesn't pull it out. It allows for light, it allows for water. I don't know why I spent so long running away from an idea that I had already proven would work. I mean, I've seen products like this on Amazon, dedicated cat planters where they had this feature built in. That's where I got the idea to print that initially. But while these might look very similar, in practice, the way they were made is very different. This one, I modeled each and every one of these holes in CAD. Now, I didn't sit there and individually put holes down. I did use circular patterns and, repeating patterns to allow for this, but I had to still model every single one of these holes. They were intentionally placed by me. Whereas this was done totally by the slicer. You see, you can take off the top and bottom layers of a print, and this is actually the infill. These are obviously the outer walls, and this is what you get. It's pretty cool. It's a nice way where you can print a part, and in this case, it was actually for a functional reason. It allows for light and water to pass through. That way it's not going to interfere with the growth of my cat grass. So yeah, I just found it interesting that I took so long straying away from a solution I had already proven worked, only to come back to it at the end. This idea of putting some sort of enclosure was kind of a waste of time. But it did allow me to have some other perspective on something that I had already initially closed the book on, and eventually led me to a much easier way of designing these types of holes in prints by taking advantage of the slicer settings rather than modeling them individually. So all in all, I would say I did learn something new from this, and I had fun doing it. But that's pretty much all I have, so bye.